Hello everybody, welcome back to my Pokemon Sleep Mechanics and Strategy Talk series. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about something that I think is kind of overlooked by a lot of the community, and that is the power of your bag space, your ingredients bag space. Now, if I was to pose the question of which do you think is better, a team that can reliably make the strongest meal in the game, or a team that runs a bunch of non-favored berry specialists? Hands down, you would almost always answer the team that makes the strongest meal in the game with ingredient specialists, correct? Well, I want to go over something very interesting, and that is this. Now, I've created a couple teams in the Randonix calculator that are like ideal. You dream for these Pokemon to create the perfect ingredient finding team or the perfect berry finding team. And I've given almost every benefit of the doubt to the ingredient specialists. And when I look at this team, it produces about 2.9 million. Now, keep in mind, I am setting it to bottomless pot. So it's got an infinite pot space, which means they're producing 536 ingredients. Your Snorlax, in all realism, is not going to be eating all those ingredients because the pot size only can hold so much unless you're running a pot increase mon, which, as you can see, this team does not run. So this is a very generous estimate for how much strength this will output. Because you look at that, 35 extra sausages a day that Snorlax is eating under this, 5 oil, 1 coffee, and 5 potatoes. Very generous output. But this is an ingredient team that has 2 ingredient specialists making the meal, and a bunch of berry specialists and the skill specialist, an energy for everyone Pokemon. Let's compare it to this team that I made. Now this team, 2.875 mil. And it's doing it with just 274 ingredients. Where is the difference? Like, this one's a little bit worse, but when you take into account the whole pot size thing that I talked about earlier, this team is definitely going to come out on top if you were able to account for that. I didn't put that in because if you had the bottomless pot turned off, then it actually heavily hurts the ingredient team more so than what's realistic because of the way that Randonix calculates it. So I felt like that would be unfair to the ingredient team to demonstrate it this way. So I just gave it bottomless pot to, give it the slight benefit of the doubt. And when you account for that, it's just this second team comes out on top. Now, what's the difference? Why is this berry specialist team producing more than the ingredients team? And the trick really comes down to the fact that there's something I'm not showing you underneath the hood. This team has been intelligent and has stockpiled ingredients for the next week. Now, when we talk about this meta, this idea, it requires the idea that you're able to, in preparation, think about what meals you're going to have in the next week, and then prep for that exact meal. This can be pretty difficult, and it can be kind of RNG if you don't have the right amount of easy travel tickets, or it's not. Sometimes there are events that force meal type that they tell you in advance, and you can really prep around that. Those teams can be very interesting, but overall, if you're prepping for meal type, you do have to rely on some RNG that you roll the right meal dish. That can kind of screw you over. But overall, this team that's done just a little bit of prep work, it hasn't even stockpiled that many ingredients, 443, is stronger than the other team. And like I said, in both these scenarios, we're getting the ideal Pokemon for this scenario. I weighted Berry Finding S as the same amount of RNG as getting Help Speed M and Ingredient Finding M on the Ingredient Specialists, which I feel is kind of fair. I could have added Help Speed M onto these guys as well to make it really the ideal, but then I felt like that would be a bit too unrealistic, and I feel like these would be actually rarer than the Ingredient Specialists, so I just want to make it kind of fair and compare them on even grounds in that regard for the rarity of Pokemon. And I'm using this White Room scenario, this perfect ideal situation, just to demonstrate the concept. Nobody's going to have this team. Don't try to hunt for this team. If you try to hunt for this team, you will lose your mind. It'll take you probably longer than a human life. But it's just something I wanted to show off. Now, yeah, this team is slightly weaker, but maybe there's a balanced approach. Because, you know, this team, they're making desserts. They're making one of the stronger meals in the game, the Zing Zap Spice Cola, but this Defiant Coffee Dressed Salad is significantly stronger. So what if we can make a team that was based around that? Now, this team, you'll see, is very similar to this team, but instead of using Aggron and Raichus, it's using a little bit of the bag space, 588 coffee stockpiled up, which is still within the bounds of the 700 that you have if you max it out, which you should be maxing that out as fast as possible. If you're not spending your diamonds on that, change your playstyle. It's very, very powerful. But running just the same Cramorant as before, 3 for alligators making the sausage, and they're actually way overproducing the sausage, and Gardevoir. Actually, I get this one bottomless pot as well. And as you can see, 3.087 million versus the 2.9 million of before, and the 2.9 million of the other one. So, even stronger when combining these strategies, which is just intriguing. And as you can see, this one's producing only 385. Yeah, there's a little bit of overflow because the most you can use in your pot size is 312 per day, and that's from the 104 maximum with good camp ticket. But overall, this team does come out on top. So, it appears that the best teams for burst output, for like when you have a 1 week long event, are the teams that can reliably make the strongest dish with the least amount of ingredient specialists. And that completely makes sense. Berry specialists are better at producing other forms of strength, so why would you rely on the ingredient specialists when really all they're doing is making the meals? If you stockpile their ingredients into the next week, you're effectively getting the value of running that ingredient specialist without it taking up the team slot, which is huge. And in this case, it takes 28 coffee a day. I could run the Vikavolt and produce 28 coffee a day, but at that point the Vikavolt's not really contributing anything too much more than what it would otherwise, like this. So it's that concept of creating what you need. And I think this kind of goes against the grain that we see of the mono ingredient meta quite a bit. It also kind of plays into it as well. It better defines mono ingredient Pokemon's role, because in this scenario, this Cramorant had to be oil potato for this team to work, because it needed to produce the potatoes and it needed to produce the oil to meet the meal requirement. This Cramorant has roll compression, and that's very powerful in this game. If you had a mono oil Cramorant, that would be much better for preparatory weeks to build up oil as stockpile. Let's say you wanted to run the Vikavolt instead this week and run to get the coffee. You could run the Cramorant in the week before to get the oil, stockpile that, and then use it into the next week. But you'd also be lacking something for potatoes, and this meal takes 22 potatoes and 22 oil versus only 28 coffee. So it's going to be much more difficult to stockpile 44 for every meal versus just 28. It's actually impossible to stockpile 44 for every meal because you're limited by the bag size of 700. So I think this gives clear definition of role to both mixed ingredient specialists and mono ingredient specialists. Mono ingredient specialists are good for preparation, to backstock the exact ingredients that you need, and mixed ingredient specialists are great for running through the week to get the coverage that you need to reliably make the meals with the backstocked ingredients. And I think that's something that some players are missing out on. Now, one of the biggest arguments to this point, or there's two big arguments to this point that I see. First one is that, what if we don't have prep time? And that is fair, but with a lot of week-long events, they give us, or with all of the week-long events actually, they've given us plenty of advance notice to be able to pull off preparation like this. In fact, in some regards, this isn't that bad. You just run a Vikavolt for not that long. Here, let's pull up my Vikavolt and see. If I pull up the production comparison, now granted my Vikavolt's like a near perfect one, but if I got this guy to level 60, he makes 73 coffee a day. We were looking to get 588. Was what it was. Divide the 73 per day. 8 days. I mean, I guess that is more than a week out, but oh well. You can always use ingredient tickets. You can always use whistles if you need. Or you can swap the Vikavolt in on the team for like a few minutes. One of these gators can drop. You don't need 107 sausage per day bonus. So overall, you can get that preparatory time if you need it. You can get those ingredients ahead of time. And another major argument is that this strategy is burst versus sustained. Sure, this team is really strong on just those pivotal weeks, whereas this team, you can run any time that you get salads, and it'll be good all the time. Which, my counterpoint to that is that you don't need to be strong in the off weeks. As events have become more and more pronounced, there have been more and more events coming every week, every like 2 or 3 weeks. We've noticed that it's better to, in the off weeks, try and prepare for big, cool events. So, burst output is far more valuable than continued sustain output in this game, especially since in those off weeks you can run Pokemon that you would otherwise never run because you want to level them and you want to get them to level 60 to unlock a new ingredient or unlock a new sub-skill. But right now, they're just not good. So, it gives more potential for nursery teams, as I like to call them. Now, meanwhile, you can run the strong teams on the event weeks. The other major point against this concept is that, well, is this realistic? Can you realistically pull this kind of ingredient output from berry specialists combined with the bag? And to counterpoint that, I have crafted 2 teams down here. 2 teams of level 60 Pokemon, and I've used Pokemon that I have in my game, or can easily get in my game. Like this Toxicroak, I don't have him like this yet, but I could sub-skill seed him to get him here. Because he's got Ingredient Fighting S and Help Speed S. So these are all possible Pokemon, both of these teams, because they're real. They're Pokemon that already exist. And I created 2 teams. The first one is an ingredient one that doesn't use any preparation. And the second one is a berry-focused one that uses a little bit of preparation. And as you'll see here, this one, 2.32 mil. That's with the ingredients. And this one, 2.38 mil. This team comes out above the other team in burst output. Not by much, but also remember, keep in mind, ingredients. This one produces 312. This one produces 452. Yeah, this one has a little bit more than the 312 listed because of the stockpile ingredients we get split up across those meals, but it's still less because I only stockpiled 394 ingredients. That's really not that many. And especially if they increase the bag size again to 800, if that ever goes to 800, I could actually prep this for a 2-week-long event if I have enough easy travel tickets to force desserts 2 weeks in a row. So overall, this team is a realistic team that meets the requirements for the meal and runs 3 berry specialists, which I see that as a complete win, because this is one of the strongest teams that I can make. Something else that makes these teams stronger, they're better for berries, which I know that kind of goes without saying, but berries are also more flexible. If I go back to my ideal teams again, and I want to compare, let's compare the ideal situation of this team. Its best berries are Flying, Electric, and Psychic. If I just punch in Flying, Electric, Psychic, then you can see 3.7 mil. If I do that on this team, if I just do the Electric Berry alone, 3.8 mil. It doesn't even take all 3 berries to line up, just one berry type, and it's already trouncing the ingredient team. But you're not always going to have that, so once again, working in the white room, But yeah. Now, how can you make a team like this yourself? I'd like to give a little bit of a tutorial, little tips and guides of how you can think through this sort of thing. So, to show this off, I'm going to make a new team, but instead of for desserts with this week, with the top tier dessert, the new Zing Zap Spiced Cola, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to make a team for the salads. A reasonable team for the salads that's not ingredient focused, that has stockpiled ingredients. And the first step to this is to get an account in RainOnX. It's a bit annoying. Maybe if you don't already, you have to upload all your Pokemon into the system. But trust me, it'll go a long way for min-maxing this game. If you're really trying to min-max this game, you should have a RainOnX account anyway. And then put all the Pokemon that you use into the system. Then pull in your Energy for Everyone specialist. It should be the first Pokemon for every team slot. I always just default put it on the end. And then, now, I'm going to be assuming level 60 for these, because this is like theoretical planning. If you want to, though, you can just keep them at their level for planning what you have currently. And you're not going to be able to reach numbers like this if you're not putting them at level 60, but that is something we consider. Now, as we can see, we need coffee, oil, sausage, and potatoes. I think a good first place to start is, do you have any berry specialists that can cover multiple of these meals? Because berry specialists are the strongest innately. So you can go into here, tell it to add a new specialist, and just look, do you have anything that covers oil? That's a berry specialist. I've got Walrein, I've got Bennett, and I've got Feraligatr. Now, Bennett only has it at base, and it's a ginger producer. And Walrein at level 60 is going to peter out a little bit as well in its oil and sausage production. But Feraligatr produces oil and sausage, and produces them both pretty reliably, so Feraligatr is a great choice. Then I kind of look through here a bit more, and think, well, oil and sausage and potatoes. What's going to make that for me? Maybe, I know that in my bag, I don't have an, like, if I want to try and cover the potatoes with berry specialists, I don't really have any options. I've just got ingredient specialists. So potatoes have to either be one that I stockpile or one that I run. So I'm going to throw in the Mr. Mime at level 60 because he produces plenty of potatoes. I could have stockpiled potatoes, but I opted to choose that over the coffee. I guess it really is kind of a horse apiece, the potatoes or the coffee, because you're going to have to stockpile one of them. In fact, actually, I'll run the Vikavolt. Let's see, how does this work if I run the Vikavolt instead and I stockpile the potatoes? I actually made this team ahead of time, so I get plenty of coffee for it. But then I need sausage, oil, and potatoes still. So maybe I can make a little more sausage with something else. And unfortunately, I don't have much else that makes sausage. I could try the Walrein, I guess, because it's a very specialist. So it's kicking out quite a bit of these. For the final team slot, there's kind of a question. How am I going to cover enough of these ingredients, the potatoes, the sausage, and the oil, to really prep for the next week? Now, I could test a couple different things. First, I'm going to try the Mr. Mime again. Because, you know, maybe, just maybe, having him there to produce the potatoes and the coffee is going to be pretty good. I can just stockpile the sausage and the oil, because I'm not producing quite enough of it. It just takes 78 ingredients per day. If you use in a calculator, pull up to 18 times 7, that's 126 oil stockpiled. 126 oil stockpiled gets me there. And then 60 times 6, or 60 times 7 is 420. 420 sausage. And it gets me there. And as you can see, I get it within the 500. I get it within 600, actually. So it makes the meal reliably. 2.5 million. This is a pretty strong team. I did have to run 2 ingredient specialists, which is kind of unfortunate. But you can also test a few other things, like if I don't have the mime. Let's say I go back a little bit. And instead, I want to try running a Charizard. Because I've got one. I'm using 2 ingredient specialists anyways. May as well try the Charizard instead. Maybe him at level 60 will cover enough sausage that I don't need to stockpile sausage. And then I can choose something else for that last slot. I need oil still. And potatoes, if I do this. So, maybe I look for something with oil. Maybe I can use that Walrein still. So, because it does have oil. So let's see. If I plug in a Walrein, and I make him level 60. Granted, he doesn't have that much oil, but he's a very strong berry specialist. And he's making just a little bit of oil to help it. 63 plus 17 is 80. 80 is within the bounds of 80 times 7. That's only 560. You still have 140 ingredient space left to mess around with. So if we do 63 potatoes a day, that's 441. You can put that in there. Now, it says -0. That means that there's like decimal points off. You can get it to just +0 by just ticking that up like 1 or 2. You can tick it up a few more. I actually like to usually get like a +2 there just to make sure that I can't get screwed by bad RNG. And then the oil is 17 times 7 for the whole week. 119 oil. And once again, you can kind of just take it up to the +2. I didn't do this for my experimental teams that I was showing off earlier, but you can. And you can see that's 580 ingredients. Still have 120 ingredient bag space. That's plenty. And this team produces 2.6 mil. So, I hope you can see just how to make these sorts of teams, how to properly use the ingredient bag for planning your teams out, and hope you can see how I think that it's really, really important to utilize this bag space well if you want to optimize your play. Granted, this is a bit more of a complex guide. Not everybody wants to be plugging their teams into the Rain.X calculator and figuring out exactly the right ingredients to prep in advance, because that is a lot more thought than a lot of players give this game. I'm a very intense min-maxer myself, so prepping like this is fun to me. I honestly spend more time in the Rain.X calculator than I do in the app itself, so there is something to be said about just how intense of a playstyle it is. But I think that if you're truly playing to the metagame of this game, this is the way to go. And I think the way that berry specialists are going to keep viability. Because I've seen a lot of people theorize that ingredient specialists will reign supreme in the long run as they introduce stronger meals and introduce higher meal levels. The thing is, you can get those benefits with berry specialists. So, I hope you learned something. Hope you've enjoyed. If you have, leave a like, subscribe. And I thank you for watching.